Hello and welcome to News Central Television. I am Likon Onobanjo. Here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. We begin the news in Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, where the 15th East Asia Summit Foreign Ministers meeting was held on Friday. The meeting reviewed ongoing regional cooperation and provided a platform for visiting foreign ministers to compare notes on contemporary geopolitics. Speaking on the sidelines of the summit, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that U.S. President Donald Trump has been invited to China to meet Xi Jinping. The meeting will be the first since U.S. President Donald Trump returned to office. It comes as Washington and Beijing are locked in disputes ranging from trade to Taiwan, and both countries vie for greater influence in the region.
It was a very productive meeting. It wasn't a negotiation, it was a meeting. It was a positive meeting, and it's important that the United States and China have productive meetings and regular engagement and communication. So we felt very good about it and we thought it was very constructive, and hopefully we'll be able to build on that to continue to bring stability to our relationship. I think it would benefit the world for that to be the case. President Trump's been invited to visit China. It's a visit he wants to undertake, and so we'll work on finding the right date for that, but I'm sure it'll happen because both presidents want it to happen.
Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio also met at the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting in Malaysia's Kuala Lumpur. The conversation followed a longer 50-minute meeting between the two top diplomats the previous day. While no details have yet emerged from Friday's exchange, Rubio told reporters after Thursday's talks that the two sides had discussed a possible new and different approach to reviving peace efforts over Ukraine. Lavrov said on Friday that he set out the Kremlin's position on settling the war. Joining us now from Dallas, Texas, in USA is Ejike Okpa, a global affairs analyst. Thank you so much, Ejike, for joining us on the news. Can you please unmute?
Thank God it's Friday.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry?
I believe you can hear me now.
I can hear you. Yeah, I said thank you for having me, and then thank you.
All right, it's good to have you around too. Now, disputes between U.S. and China are multifaceted, from trade to geopolitics, technology to cybersecurity, Taiwan to Russia-Ukraine alliances. Can they both ever agree and work together?
Well, it's like a marriage. I mean, no marriage is perfect. Some days it's good, some days it's contentious, but, you know, you don't go to divorce. You just keep, managing the relationship until, both sides feel that they're comfortable with each other. China needs America, America needs China. We can't dispute that, but it's not going to be to where, China is trying to undermine America because they think, they got it going on. China wouldn't be what China is if not for the relationship that was started some decades ago when Richard Nixon, opened that door. So we have to respect and also be cognizant of the genesis of this relationship. The Chinese have benefited from American ingenuity. They have benefited from a whole lot of things. The trade part of it, if not for the trade they have with America, China wouldn't have been anywhere close to what they are today. So, but again, we are in 21st century. We don't have the need for a contentious relationship, like we had during the the Cold War, where East Bloc and the West Bloc, we are all, pulling and pushing at the end, Eastern Bloc, got crushed and America became the only one standing. China cannot, undermine America. China cannot be a spine on America in order for them to be relevant. There's 1.something billion Chinese, 90% of them are still very, very poor. If not for the high-handedness of their leadership, where the Communist Party decide what goes on, which is more like a waterfall kind of relationship. China is nothing anybody would like to be associated with.
Now, we are seeing that tensions are easing as the two sides agreed to a trade framework during talks between negotiators in London last month. But then, are we finally looking at an end to years of diplomatic conflict between these two powerhouses?
Well, I mean, we want to see end to something, but again, like I said earlier, everything is a relationship. No relationship in itself is perfect. Both parties to the relationship have to constantly work at it, and then you also have to constantly watch the other partner, because there are a lot of things, there are a lot of egos that go into relationship, uh, and so that is what keeps it going. But if it is swear one is saying, "Hey, I can do without you," and then I'm going to undermine you, then there's going to be a reaction. I'm an American by choice. I wouldn't live in China. I don't think China is relevant in the world. But for countries that have nothing to do for themselves, they might see China as relevant, and that is fine. But at the end of the day, every country has to be protective and have to be determined to create a reputation for their own country. China ain't going to do it for you. America ain't going to do it for you until you want to do it for yourself. China was nothing. When I was in Nigeria, who cared about China? But now, in less than 40 years, they've been able to come to the world stage looking relevant. But, that relevance is just relative, because when you really look into the Chinese content, there's nothing collateral about them.
Interesting. Well, we are seeing now that President Trump, just threatened about 10% tariff on BRICS, a bloc that China rather belongs to, and goods from China already face a higher tariff rate of about 30%. So then, won't these so-called meeting further, cause a setback, most especially when you look at the narratives about the trade tariffs, of course, around the defenses, rather, that these two countries are trying to mend?
Tariff is a right for every country. If you say I don't want to impose tariffs, tariff is like taxation of things that comes into your country. If you want to eliminate that and say, hey, bring in what you want, sell it to my people, I take my money and leave your country, that's a choice every country has to make. But America is saying no. If you want to bring in something into this country, it could be specific items, it could be anything from a particular country. America is entitled to that. I think any country that is going to be negatively affected because of that tariff now goes to the negotiating table and try to seek ways, to say, hey, how can we manage this? But tariff is just like immigration is not a privilege. It's a right. And those rights have to be negotiated in order for them to be relevant. And it's usually a bilateral thing. It's not a global thing. So all the countries that are jumping up and down and trying to point finger, say, oh, America shouldn't do this. No, what you have to do is mobilize your own domestic resources and seek a way to engage the person who's imposing a tariff on you. That is what's the most relevant way to be relevant. But it's not the way to now say, oh, you shouldn't do it. No, every country is entitled to their own sovereign rights, just like your currency. You shouldn't agree or allow your currency to be devalued in order for you to become a dumping ground.
All right, now the 15th East Asia Summit Foreign Ministers meeting was just concluded, and 8 out of the 10 countries will face tariffs from the U.S. on August 1. And we know that China is the #2 biggest economy in the world. Now, do you think that China will be able to negotiate a fairer deal for itself and for the bloc at the proposed meeting?
Of course, it's to their own interest to negotiate something for them. The Southeast Asian countries, if you lump all of them together, they have the world's biggest population concentration, having probably 60% of the world concentration, includes India, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, and all of those things. So we recognize that. But, because you have the largest population doesn't mean you have the highest quality of life. It's all out, quantity doesn't measure up to quality. And that's why you have the Western world have been able to do it with the less population they have. Look at all the Western European countries. Their population is a fraction of what is in India. And India being the largest democracy in the world, and China being the largest communist country in the world. Look at where India is. And India has more PhDs and educated people than anybody in the world, but it's still not a relevant country in the world, because democracy doesn't really mean economic development if your structure is weak, or if you are one of those, wherever you go, you dangle like a snake, you touch everything, you you touch everything as you move along. You have to be firm. You have to be self-protective in order for you to be relevant. And that's what China has done. Just not really, pause a minute and think about it. A communist country, run circles around India, which is the largest democracy in the world. So what does that tell you? It's not the form of government you have, it's how relevant your government is to the needs of your own people first before you put your better foot forward. And that's what China has done. I don't envy them for that, but I don't think that China is a country that I would like to embrace. I don't care about them. I was there in January. It wouldn't pay me $1 billion to live in China. Because again, where I live matters because I'm about freedom and liberty and the happiness. And in China, you don't have that, regardless of what it is they think they are doing.
Well, I guess Asia and, of course, Africa would differ on that thoughts. But then thank you so much, Ejike Okpa, for sharing your insights with us on the news. Well, we're still in Asia anyway. The top military chiefs of South Korea, the United States and Japan met in Seoul on Friday as U.S. President Donald Trump piles pressure on Washington's allies over defense spending and trade. General Dan Kane, the top U.S. military officer, held talks with his South Korean counterpart Kim Yong-sol and Japan's General Yoshida as part of an annual meeting on regional security. They discussed growing military ties between Moscow and Pyongyang, which has sent weapons and thousands of troops for Russia's war in Ukraine. Away from that, U.S. President Donald Trump has said he will send weapons, including Patriot air defense systems, for Ukraine via NATO. Trump made the announcement after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke of having positive dialogue with Trump on ensuring that arms arrived on time, particularly air defense systems. Zelensky said he had asked for 10 Patriot systems after a surge in Russian drone and missile attacks on Ukrainian cities in the past week. After a phone call with Russia's Vladimir Putin last week, Trump said he was not happy that progress had not been made towards ending the war, and has since complained that Putin's very nice attitude turned out to be meaningless. Still on Ukraine, President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Odile Renaud-Bassot, has stated that 7.6 billion euros have been financed since the start of the war in the various sectors of activity. Renaud-Bassot made this known while highlighting the next steps in Ukraine's reconstruction on the sidelines of the 2025 Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome. This comes after President Volodymyr Zelensky urged politicians and businesses in Rome to boost defense investments in the face of intensified attacks on his country by Russia.
On a à peu près financé 2,6 milliards d'euros de crédits pour les PME dans le pays depuis le début de la guerre. Donc nos financements depuis le début de la guerre, on a déployé 7,6 milliards d'euros. À la fin de la conférence, ça sera 7,6 milliards d'euros dans ces différents secteurs d'activité. Le contexte de guerre n'est pas très favorable à faire venir rendre des investissements, des nouveaux investissements étrangers difficiles ou plus risqués. Il y en a, donc c'est quand même impressionnant de noter qu'on voit des investisseurs étrangers. Donc j'ai cité l'exemple des télécoms, mais on voit aussi des investisseurs étrangers, par exemple dans le domaine des renouvelables.
Now, the EU's top diplomat on Friday slammed Russia's latest blitz on Ukraine as unacceptable, saying the 27-nation bloc was pondering a new raft of sanctions against Moscow. Russia has pummeled Ukraine this week with the largest drone and missile barrages since Moscow sent troops into its neighbor more than 3 years ago. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said that Brussels was considering an 18th round of sanctions against Moscow, and that they are also still in negotiations to put the oil price cap on that would deprive Russia from the means to fund the war.
Russia has increased its attacks against the civilian people to really cause as much pain as possible for the civilians, and that is unacceptable. Of course, the tools in our hands are supporting Ukraine more, that they would have air defense to take down those rockets, that they won't hurt people. The 18th sanctions package, we are also still in negotiations to put the oil price cap on. That would deprive Russia from...
Let's go on a short break now. When we return, the UN says more than 3,000 people have been killed in Haiti gang wars in 2025. We'll tell you more in a bit. Stay with us. Bringing you the rest of the stories now. Cambodian lawmakers have amended the constitution, paving the way for people charged with foreign collusion to be stripped of their citizenship. This comes despite concerns that such a law could be used to silence government critics. Rights groups have long accused Cambodia's government of using draconian laws to stifle opposition and legitimate political dissent. All of Cambodia's 125 lawmakers, including Prime Minister Un Manet, voted unanimously to change the wording of the constitution to say receiving, losing and revoking Khmer nationality shall be determined by law. Away from that, thousands of mourners on Friday commemorated in Srebrenica the genocide committed 30 years ago by Bosnian Serb forces. This is one of Europe's worst atrocities since World War II. The remains of 7 victims were later rested during the commemorations, which marked the bloodiest episode of Bosnia's inter-ethnic war in the 1990s. They included those of Sedalia Alek, one of more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys killed by Bosnian Serb forces after they captured the eastern town on July 11, 1995.
Trajalo, nakon 30 godina sam prvi put ovdje i jako sam ponosna i na sebe, na svoga sina, da smo se odlučili na tu želju. Pa jesam, izgubila sam brata i mnogobrojnu rodbinu i moga oca pre pada Srebrenice. Brata sam izgubila u padu Srebrenice i sam imala želju da se odužim tom svom bratu.
Supruge i nastradao brat, mnoga familija, a poruka je što više omladih da dođe da se ne zaboravi ovaj dan.
The United Nations says more than 3,000 people have died amid escalating gang violence in Haiti since the beginning of the year. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, with swaths of the country under the control of rival armed gangs who carry out murders, rapes and kidnappings. While much of the violence had long been concentrated in Port-au-Prince, the Rights Office highlighted the deadly impact as the gangs extend their reach far beyond the coastal capital.
From the 1st of January to the 30th of June, at least 3,141 people were killed across Haiti.
Away from that, 30 Kurdistan Workers' Party militants burned their weapons at the mouth of a cave in northern Iraq on Friday, marking a symbolic but significant step toward ending a decades-long insurgency against Turkey. Footage from the ceremony showed the fighters, half of whom were women, queuing to place AK-47 assault rifles bandoliers and other guns into a large grey cauldron. Flames later engulfed the black gun shafts pointed to the sky as Kurdish, Iraqi and Turkish officials watched nearby. The PKK has locked in a conflict with the Turkish state and has been outlawed since 1984. It decided in May to disband, disarm and end its separatist struggle after a public call to do so from its long-imprisoned leader, Abdullah Öcalan. Now, the United Nations has allocated $625,000 for emergency response efforts in Syria. This is as fighters and firefighting crews extinguished 2 major forest fires in Hama countryside whilst continuing to battle devastating wildfires in Latakia province for the 9th consecutive day. Emergency and Disaster Management Minister Raed Al-Saleh announced that Syrian civil defense and firefighting brigades responded to 2 large forest fires in Hama countryside during recent hours, causing damage to vast areas of forests and agricultural lands and significant damage to homes and property. Gaza Civil Defense Agency said Israeli forces killed 18 people on Friday, including 10 who were waiting for aid in the south of the war-ravaged territory. The fresh deaths came as the United Nations said nearly 800 people had been killed trying to access food in Gaza since late May, when Israel began easing a more than 2-month total blockade on supplies. Meanwhile, undertakers at the Nassar Medical Complex in Khan Yunis said that bodies are lying in the refrigerators as Gazans desperately search for cemeteries to bury them.
بناشد كل اهل الخير، بناشد الحكومه، بناشد الكل وفروا لنا مكان نقدر ندفن، ما فيش مكان في خان يونس لا نستطيع التوجه الى المقبره لانه جيش الاحتلال هي في المقبره. واي بني ادم بروح على المقبره بعرض حاله للخطر، والثلاجات عندي هي مكدسه بالشهداء، فاعطوني حل وين ادفن؟ اذا صار عندي زاد الوضع استخدم المقابر الجماعيه اللي هو افحر في الكباش، هذا اذا سمحوا لي افحر في الكباش وادفن بدون لا حجر ولا بلاط ولا شيء بالرمل مباشره. اطلق نار امبارح وضربوني غاز وما قدرتش ادفن. المقبره النمساويه والمقبره التركيه طبعا ما هي تجربت، الاحتلال قاعد يجرب فيها.
And talking about a two-state solution, French President Emmanuel Macron has urged his country and the UK to jointly recognize Palestinian statehood, describing it as the only path to peace. Speaking during a joint press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer in London, Macron stressed the urgent need for efforts to advance a two-state solution to the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Starmer reaffirmed the UK's commitment to a just political settlement of the Palestinian issue and highlighted the importance of international support for the Palestinian people and the need for stability in the region.
Pour mettre fin au calvaire des otages et à celui des Gazaouis. La continuation d'une guerre sans fin et sans objectif stratégique fait peser une menace grave pour la région et pour notre sécurité collective. Elle est aujourd'hui le lieu d'une déshumanisation que rien ne peut justifier. Ensemble, nous savons la nécessité d'offrir un chemin politique et je crois à l'avenir de la solution à 2 États comme base d'une architecture de sécurité régionale qui permettra à Israël de vivre en paix et en sécurité avec ses voisins. Je crois à la nécessité d'unir nos voix.
Finally, on the news, at a fortress just west of Paris is the loft that houses Europe's last military pigeons. It is the only place in Europe where you can find and meet carrier pigeons bred by the French army, once used to transmit messages, as was the case during the First and Second World Wars. Well, as the saying goes, it is not only fine feathers that make fine birds, and we might now think of them as soldiers with wings. That's all on Beyond the Continent. Do remember that you can send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. You can follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Do watch us live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Arvo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Onobanjo.